No one expected Iran to strike like this, and no one dared to respond. The world had grown used to the usual threats, the tense statements, and the diplomatic chess moves that often ended in stalemates. But this time, it was different. Iran's message wasn't delivered through words or warnings. It came in the form of action swift, precise, and impossible to ignore. The kind of move that makes even the most confident opponents pause, reevaluate, and think twice before making their next move. This wasn't a reckless gamble. Every detail seemed calculated, from the timing to the targets, designed not just to make a point but to prove one. Iran was telling the world, asterisk, we will not be pushed around. Asterisk, and this wasn't just about military strength. It was about national pride, sovereignty, and a refusal to bow to any power that sought to weaken or control them. In that moment, Iran wasn't just defending itself, it was shaping its own narrative on the global stage. People across the Middle East and beyond watched in a mix of shock and admiration. Some saw it as defiance, others as bravery. Either way, it was clear that this strike had shifted something deeper than borders or battle lines. It had shifted perceptions. For decades, Iran had been painted in many ways by its rivals, often underestimated or dismissed. But now, it had forced even its harshest critics to acknowledge its capability and resolve. What made the event even more impactful was the silence that followed. Not a silence of ignorance, but of caution. The usual rapid condemnations and promises of retaliation were replaced by carefully worded statements, hushed consultations, and long pauses before microphones. Iran had drawn a line, and no one seemed eager to cross it. That alone spoke volumes. On the streets, in cafes, and on digital platforms, conversations erupted. Supporters celebrated what they saw as a long, overdue show of strength, while skeptics debated whether it was a wise move in an already volatile region. But no matter the opinion, one truth stood unshaken: Iran had made a move that could not be undone. And the ripple effects were already spreading. International analysts dissected every second of the strike, replaying footage, studying satellite images, and tracing the trajectory of events that led to this moment. Was this purely defensive? Was it a strategic warning? Or was it a declaration of a new chapter in regional power dynamics? The questions hung in the air, but the reality was already clear. Iran had demonstrated that it plays by its own rules. This was not just about missiles, targets, or explosions. It was about telling the world that Iran's place in global affairs would not be dictated by others. It was a moment that reminded everyone that even in a world dominated by larger powers, determination and resolve can still command respect. And for those who thought Iran could be cornered, this strike was a sharp and unforgettable answer. No one expected Iran to strike with such precision and confidence, yet when it happened, the world stopped to watch. For years, tensions had been building: sanctions, threats, military presence along its borders, and endless political pressure. Many believed Iran would continue to respond with words and diplomacy, but this time, the strategy changed. The strike was not reckless. It was calculated, measured, and designed to send a very clear message. It wasn't just about targeting a location. It was about showing capability, reach, and resolve. Every missile fired was a statement. Iran would not be cornered, intimidated, or dictated to. The region, already on edge, suddenly felt the weight of that decision. For some, it was a dangerous escalation. For others, it was a moment of national pride and proof that Iran could stand on its own. Even those far from the Middle East felt the ripple effect. Markets shook. Leaders recalculated their words, and military analysts scrambled to understand the implications. This was more than an attack. It was a defining moment, one that would shape perceptions for years to come and prove that Iran was willing to act when pushed too far. The strike was not born out of impulse, but out of years of built-up frustration and strategic preparation. Iran had been watching, waiting, and planning, fully aware that every move would be scrutinized by its rivals and the global community. Intelligence, timing, and precision all came together in a single operation that would alter the balance of power in the region. The message was unmistakable. Iran's defense was not limited to its own borders. It could project power beyond, targeting with accuracy and demonstrating that its technology and military planning were far more advanced than many had assumed. While critics called it a provocation, supporters saw it as a justified act of sovereignty, a way of reclaiming respect in a political climate that often dismissed Iran's voice. This wasn't just about retaliation. It was about rewriting the narrative. For too long, Iran had been portrayed as reactive, responding only after being wronged. This time, it acted first, setting the terms of engagement and forcing others to think twice before making the next move. The world was now faced with a new reality. Iran was not just a player in the game, it was setting the pace. The aftermath of the strike sent ripples far beyond the region. Global markets reacted, political leaders scrambled for statements, and military analysts dissected every detail. Yet, what stood out was the silence from those expected to respond with force. No missiles were launched in return. No sudden military escalations followed, only careful words and cautious diplomacy. This silence spoke volumes. It suggested that the strike had achieved more than a tactical win. It had instilled a pause, a reconsideration of strategies by those who once believed pressure alone could keep Iran in check. Ordinary people in the region saw it as a turning point, a moment when a nation long pressured and sanctioned stood up without flinching. For Iran, it was proof that careful planning could turn vulnerability into leverage. The strike was not just a demonstration of military might, it was a lesson in restraint, precision, and calculated strength. And in that lesson, there was a warning. Pushing too far would not only fail, it could backfire. The balance had shifted, and those watching knew they were witnessing a new chapter in the geopolitical playbook. International reactions to the strike were a mix of shock, admiration, and unease. Some nations quietly applauded Iran's ability to act decisively without plunging the region into full-scale war, while others expressed concern over the precedent it set. News outlets around the world analyzed the event from every angle: military precision, political timing, and the broader strategic implications. For Iran's allies, the strike was a clear sign that the nation could protect its interests and project strength beyond its borders. For its adversaries, it was a wake-up call that old tactics of intimidation were losing effectiveness. Even countries that had maintained a neutral stance found themselves reassessing their diplomatic approaches. This was not the act of an isolated state lashing out blindly, but of a player that had learned to use its limited resources with maximum effect. The careful balance between action and restraint resonated with many in the global south, where smaller nations often face similar pressures. In this single, well-executed move, Iran had not only defended its position, but also reshaped how others would engage with it in the future. The message was unmistakable. Iran would not be pushed around, and the world would have to take note. Inside Iran, the strike became a powerful symbol of unity and national pride. Across cities, people gathered in public squares, watching footage replayed on giant screens, their faces lit with a mix of relief and satisfaction. For many, it wasn't just about military success, it was about dignity. Years of sanctions, political pressure, and threats had left a heavy mark on the nation's psyche, but this moment felt like a turning point. Citizens spoke of finally seeing their country stand up to forces that had long sought to weaken it. Social media lit up with messages of support, hashtags celebrating the operation, and videos of families waving flags from their balconies. Even those who had been critical of the government's policies acknowledged the strike as a moment where national interests were defended with precision and purpose. For veterans and soldiers, it was a reaffirmation of their sacrifices, proving that their service had meaning beyond the battlefield. The emotional impact reached deep into the cultural consciousness, reminding Iranians of their resilience and capacity to stand their ground. In that moment, it wasn't just a strike, it was a statement to the world that Iran's spirit was unbroken. The night of the strike will be remembered not just as a chapter in military history, but as a defining moment in the soul of a nation. It was a night when fear gave way to resolve, when silence was replaced with a voice that echoed across continents. The message was unmistakable: Iran would not be bent, broken, or reduced to submission. In the stillness that followed, the world could feel a shift, as if the balance of power had moved ever so slightly, yet unmistakably, toward those who dared to stand their ground. For Iranians, it was more than victory. It was a reclaiming of honor, a reminder that their destiny is not written by others but forged by their own hands. And for those who watched from afar, it was proof that in the face of overwhelming odds, there are moments when a single act can change the course of history. This was not just a strike, it was a declaration, carved into the timeline of the world, that some nations will fight to the last breath for their right to exist with dignity. The reverberations will be felt for generations.